Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, May 25th Penfield Town Board work session for this evening. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I would like to note for the record that we have all town board members present except Councilperson Lee. We also have our Deputy Town Clerk, Sue Scheidt, Director of Finance, Barbara Cherto, and the Wonder Twins, Director of Planning and Engineering, Mark Valentine, and Director of Developmental Services, Carrie Ivers. So, with that, I would like to move to the approval of minutes from May 11th, 2022.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Councilperson Cole and a second from Councilperson Draw. Are there any comments or questions about that? Okay, seeing none, may we have a roll call vote?
Cinti.
Aye.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
4 ayes.
Thank you. Regarding the agenda, we do need to remove one item, action item D, which is moratorium on future mixed-use development applications to allow for code and manual updates. We are removing this because we are not ready to have a discussion about this just yet. We are, as a town board, looking at updating our code for the mixed-use development, but we do want to fine-tune that before we even bring it for discussion. So that'll be removed. And also under new business, and it's really more of an informational item, is to alert the board about potential crossing guard addition to the town staff, okay? Yep. So we'll add that. Great. Their monthly reports are not due as of now. That'll be for June. And we have no guests here to speak to a particular public hearing or anything, so we can move right on into our action items with Ms. Cherto.
Okay, as we talked about in March, when we started thinking of how we want to spend some of the ARPA money, the American Recovery Act funding that we received half last year, totaling $1,912,866.05. We will receive our second tranche. It gets doled out to the state first, then the state passes it down to us. So I assume we will get that probably July. I forwarded you last week some updated on some priority projects that we've been discussing. And I know Supervisor Cinti has discussed with each of you. So want to see if we have thoughts on if these are to be the ones we move forward with to begin. Bear in mind that the money has to be allocated by December of 2024 and fully expended by December of 2026. So although that sounds far away, it's really not when we're talking projects that span over a one-year cycle. So looking for some feedback now, and we'll see which projects to move forward and then do a little public informational session. The plan is for June 8th.
Right. I don't have it in front of me, but one thing I noticed that LaSalle's Landing restrooms. Oh, okay, but I remember that.
Yep.
And I was thinking, we were talking about restrooms potentially being in Shadow Pines. Are we, to me, that's sort of a priority, thank you. Are we talking about doing the restrooms at Shadow Pines under something else?
Nope.
Because
It's on there.
To me, I would rather, personally, see that versus LaSalle's Landing, which is a little more difficult to maintain at one point. But also, the Shadow Pines is such it's so important, and I think anyway, to have that there, the restroom, before we go off and have the pickleball courts go up, because there's no place, there's no, porta potties is one thing. When we did the Rothfuss Park, that was one thing we insisted on when we were developing Rothfuss Park. We created that restroom facility. Actually, Jim Mulley was on the town board, and he pushed it big time because he was going off to all these things. He says, this is something the residents really need first. And I kind of go with that philosophy. It's really worked out well there. I would propose, if we're doing the restroom facility, that it be at the Shadow Pines on that end where we're considering the pickleball court versus going down to LaSalle's Landing, which really, at this point, it's more for fishing people, and it's a smaller park, and I think it's less used. I may be wrong, but
go ahead.
potentially less used compared to what it will be at Shadow Pines, because you also have those people that are dog walkers. I mean, I hear it all the time, the people that are cruising through that area. It's very popular, and restroom is sorely in need. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Question for this, and I agree, Linda, I think that's a great idea, but I also have a question to ask you. On the LaSalle's Landing restroom slash shelter, for, is that the shelter with, I mean, is that actually a pavilion with a shelter, possibly?
Yeah, we're thinking of something similar to what Rothfuss Park has now. We have a bathroom on the front with an overhang and, just some area for, be out of the sun, and have some picnic tables on the back side. So it'd be an open air shelter, not not an enclosed,
So would that be something that we'd want to have the same type of a structure at Shadow Pines?
Yeah, and that's part of that first package we
number
looked at
one,
as doing the parking lot improvements, bring
Right.
utilities in, do a bathroom with that, as well as the pickleball
Oh, so that
was
that
under
is
item number
included
one.
in- That
Yes.
was included.
If you
Okay.
notice,
Well,
just
just ask that question, and that, well, okay, go on.
Well, just if you notice, improvements at Shadow Pines is, the estimate went up because it included not just the pickleball courts, but the restroom shelter and the parking lot in it. And then LaSalle's Landing is still listed as its own separate line item.
Okay.
And we're sure that's going to cover it?
Yeah.
Well, what we did, just so you notice, right here is $2,650,000. We don't have final numbers yet, so we
Okay.
don't want to over allocate. So that's why we're stopping right here for a
Okay,
moment.
so maybe the thought is, how about this? If we, that the Shadow Pines is the priority, if there still is enough money to continue on with LaSalle's Landing, that we do that, but if it's one or the other, if we're gonna, just like we phase in projects, you do one thing first, and make sure we cover that before we go ahead and do the other.
So then what would your thoughts be on upgrading LED streetlights and then the Four Corners improvements?
Well, I think what the Shadow Pines versus LaSalle's Landing is more of a comparison to the other ones, that the costs of building structures and things of that nature are the things that we have the biggest issues with right now, right, for costs and so on like that.
You could put all of the funds into any one of these things.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
I
You're going to
know,
have
I
to,
know.
so you're going to have to decide what is going to benefit the most people. We talked about, as a town board, wanting to spread it around various areas of the town and not just target one specific area, also benefiting different populations. And one of the things about Shadow Pines was, we wanted to serve the seniors.
Yes.
So I'm still hearing that that's a priority, right?
I believe so.
Because it's not just the seniors and the pickleball, it's all these people that are over there now, utilizing it, their families. It's more than just that. And, even the disc golf people, I mean, they're all got to,
Barbara,
why
can you
that-
speak again to the use of the funds or the timing of it?
Sure.
And if we were to, look at this, what are our commitments? When do they have to be made? That sort of thing.
So, and like I said, on our March meeting, Debbie and Linda, you both brought up the restroom facility at Shadow Pines, so that's why we went back, and Marie, Mark, Carrie, Eric, we all got together, and that's how we ended up with the 1.5 as a more realistic estimate to include the bathroom and include all the utilities and such. So with the ARPA funds, up to $10 million we can claim as being lost revenue due to COVID, and you can spend that on general governmental, which is pretty much a very broad brush, anything that's governmental services, and the goal is to be impactful to your community for the future. So that's why it's very much, they encourage you to lean towards infrastructure, things that you would have done had you not lost money during COVID. That's essentially, that's a kind of distills it down. So, as I said, we received the first tranche in 2021, we'll receive the second in 2022. It has to be fully committed, meaning we have to be under contractual obligation by the end of 2024.
Okay.
So anything that we decide to move forward, construction plans, as I said, that does take quite a bit of time.
Is that for the first batch or for both
Nope,
combined?
for both.
Okay.
So fully committed by the end of '24 and then fully expended by the end of 2026.
Okay.
So, as I said, so we do have time, but the time is ticking away rather quickly. So we kind of, when we all went back after we talked in March, we went back and, relooked at some numbers and then also tried to include the year. So what would, when we would start to move forward. Obviously, Shadow Pines is kind of already in discussion with the design phases and things that have happened with the mountain biking and the talk of pickleball courts. So thinking that 2022, 2023, we'd really kind of pull the trigger, make the decision to use ARPA funds on the things that the community has said that they want. The streetlights, again, we started that project last year with doing the audit. Eric is working on really finalizing more of those numbers now. He intends to have more information for the June 8th meeting for little harder numbers. Again, that was something that we kind of figured that benefits the town at large, the driving residents. It's better for the town environmentally. It's better for the town, obviously, economically. We'll be saving money once those, we turn over to LED. It's safety. I mean, that's just win-win-win in various columns. And that is something, because we are already in the start of it with the audit, doing the actual transition to the LED fixtures. We can have that happen in 2022. So, I mean, we're kind of looking at, as the supervisor said, spreading it around, the money, some NB most impactful. The LaSalle's Landing, it is something that's been talked about for a while. We put it as a 2023. Obviously, like Mark said, it's a structure that would be similar to what's at Rothfuss, somewhat similar to what we're looking at for the softball fields. So that's how we came up again with that number. So.
I have go ahead, Councilperson Draw.
I guess my only point is, I guess we can't do everything we want to do in totally without, it's still a lot of money, 3.8 million, but it's still, it goes fast, as we all say.
It goes fast, yes.
One thing I had a question on that LaSalle's Landing piece, the restroom, of anything on here, that might be something that I would say maybe we could do that later. And is there opportunities for grants? I believe we've had grants down there with the water, with Rondequoit Bay and stuff that we have opportunities for.
So your question comes in good timing. The state's consolidated funding application process is out. So we are exploring, there is grant money available from the Department of State to fund both the preparation of local waterfront revitalization program plans. We don't need to do that. Ours is relatively updated, more recently updated. But you can also apply for funding for implementation of identified projects and priorities. So that's one of the things we were going to be looking at. Typically, there's a match requirement, I believe, and I'm quoting after just participating in the overview yesterday. I believe it's a 50-50 match or a 75-25 match. So depending on the cost of a project, and there's a max on how much funding they will provide. Certainly something that we're looking into as to whether or not could be, make the attempt at the CFA and see what funds, and potentially earmark the ARPA fund as the local match if needed. So we certainly could do that, and that might help to reduce the amount of ARPA funds that are needed to fund that improvement.
Freeing up something for another project.
Yes.
Okay. Follow-up question. How close is LaSalle's Landing to the marina? Is that?
Tell you in a moment.
Which marina?
You're talking
South
about
Point.
Empire? The one?
We got two. I mean, there's
South Point.
South Point.
Oh, that marina. No, that's not what I was.
A couple thousand feet.
Yeah, hardly, yeah.
The only reason I ask is because I was talking with somebody yesterday who said that was either the busiest or the second busiest marina on the bay.
On the bay. It's probably the biggest.
Yeah.
And they did part of a boardwalk over their property too, they did part
They're
of their
supposed to.
boardwalk,
They've
right?
got a walkway path that goes around the project, and there's public areas, and then as well as it ties into Water's Edge.
Ties into,
There's some pathways there, and then even as you go up the hill, it connects over towards, the county property.
right.
I just wondered, I think it's a great project. If we can certainly use these funds as a match of some sort, it frees up a little bit more. But
agree.
I think that there is a population that uses LaSalle's Park,
There's a lot of fishermen, there's a lot of kayaker, canoers that you go on there, especially on the weekends and evenings. It is quite busy, and there are no facilities down there right now for the public.
True.
Agreed.
So, there is a boat launch. There is, we just did
Yeah.
a parking lot expansion.
Right.
We've done some upgrades down there, but, facilities is in bathroom facilities down there. There is no, public area for that. We've looked at that.
It seems a little like it needs something there.
We looked at that for a couple of years. I know we did apply for some grant funding a few years ago. We unfortunately didn't get the money in that go-around, but, that's an opportunity we can look at again and, see if that's a source. And then at least if it's a 50-50 match, then you
Yeah.
got 50% of it. and we
That
can
sounds excellent because we have so little of the waterfront that, if we have
That's our
something in
piece
there,
of-
it's
That's our
like,
piece of it.
Yeah,
Wow,
that's our piece of the
Penfield.
waterfront. And
it might mean something, yeah.
I think it's used quite a bit.
I have a question. I have to ask just because, I'm liaison to the library board. If the library, they're doing surveys now about what they want to improve on where they are now, not so much about talking about the future, but building another building or something, but, what they can do with what the facility is now. If they had a request for funds, is this something this funding source could, or is it because it's a library, it'd be separate from what the town? You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times, what libraries want is not.
It could be
coming
a
out of-
funding source because it would be improvements to the existing building, which the town owns, so it's a facility. I know Marie had mentioned, we did talk about with the library, but Rhonda's kind of pursuing some grant things, so they weren't they
not
weren't ready to kind of add to the list. As I said, we wanted to at least pick a few things to get started and move forward, knowing that we're
Right.
not committing all the funds and,
No.
new priorities will come up.
Right.
There's enough slack in this that we can have a further conversation. But if we were to look at LaSalle's Landing and hopefully have some grant monies with that, should we look at reducing that amount?
Right.
Yes, and the good thing is the turnaround time typically from application to award, typically before the end of the year, you would have an idea of whether or not your project was moving forward. In some cases, that sooner because they're reviewed at the local level by region to determine sort of what projects are being advanced or supported and which ones aren't before they get to the governor's office. So we'd have some sense of where we are within, by hopefully November or December. And so that gives the board time to sort of reevaluate where the funds are and what's eligible and not eligible.
I mean, we could certainly just move forward with the top three, bring them to the public on June 8th and say, we want to start, spending what we have and move forward with some key projects. And then as we get later, plan on once those move forward and we start having better pricing, I mean, we could be revisiting and having another public information session, February or March of next year.
No doubt. And since the LaSalle's Landing is not even on our radar until 2023 anyway, I might suggest that we just remove that for now.
Sure.
I feel very comfortable, and I think the board is in agreement about the top three.
Yeah, I do agree with that. The only question I was going to ask, Mark, you might be best suited to answer this, but so it's like 3 different restroom facilities that we kind of have on our radar. Are you thinking the design would be the same? Is that the thought?
Yeah, I think there's some.
Would fit all the different locations?
I think there's some economies of scale there. We can kind of use a similar design. The one over here, we're not planning on having a shelter on the back of it, just due to the the space and everything else. So it would just kind of be just the bathroom facilities. The other 2, we're looking at possibility of having at least kind of a covered back, shelter portion. So hopefully.
So my only question, follow-up to that would be: is there any benefit to doing 3 at the same time? Is there any savings, or is there any?
I think on the design side, since they're in different remote locations, I don't know if the bidding, would help, but at least on the design side, if we can use, a similar design at all 3 locations, then saves you from bidding out, 3 totally different designs or layouts.
Gotcha, thank you.
All right. Are we comfortable then with setting a public information session for June 8th to discuss the top 3? Okay. Top 3, and then we'll remove LaSalle's Landing for later in the year.
Yep. I'll
Okay.
move it back to, other future potential lists from our capital improvement plans.
And I'm sure we will have things to talk about.
Yes,
Thank you
Sure.
very much, Ms. Chertow.
you got it.
All right. I don't think we have to have a motion to do a public information session on June 8th, correct? Or no?
No.
No. Okay, fine. Great. Moving on, Tree City designation. I wanted to have a conversation. Councilperson Draw alerted me that the Conservation Board is very interested in becoming more active in the community and would like to pursue several different things, including guest speakers and outreach to the public. They'd also like to look at Tree City USA designation, which is something that we, as a town board, would want to say, yes, let's go ahead and give them permission. I did a little bit of research, and first of all, there are several towns nearby who actually already are Tree City designated, including Fairport, Brighton, I think Arundecoy just started, Honey Eye Falls, Lima, Canandaigua. So it's out there. And then I looked at the standards, and basically this is just a designation, a nice thing to say that we're a Tree City USA. It doesn't come with more than that. I'll be straight. But there are 4 standards, most of which we already meet. So the first one is having a tree board or department that's legally responsible for the care of trees, and we have that. That's our Department of Public Works and our Parks Department. The second standard is a tree care ordinance, which the Conservation Board is willing to discuss and develop for approval by the town board, obviously. So that's something that could be done fairly easily. The third is a community forestry program with an annual budget of at least $2 per capita for population. Before you panic, I looked at the list of what qualifies as an expense, and we already spend that $2 per capita because it includes things like supplies, time spent pruning or removing trees, consultants that we consult with all the time for projects, equipment like chainsaws and things like that. And when I ran it by Ms. Chertow, she was convinced that we absolutely already exceed that, and this wouldn't cost us any additional funds. And then the fourth standard was an Arbor Day observance and proclamation, and as you know, we just had a tree planting event with a proclamation. So
We're there.
wondered if that was something that would interest the town board.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So Councilperson Draw, can you take that back to the Conservation
I
Board?
shall.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, great, thank you for the speedy conclusion of that.
And then, Madam Supervisor, do you like them to sign off and then probably do some kind of a proclamation on becoming a
Yeah.
tree?
I think we have to put the pieces in place. The first thing the only thing we're really missing, though, is that tree ordinance. So I'm leaving it to you and the town Conservation Board to draft that. And that obviously is subject to approval by the town board.
Understood.
All right. Great. And Ms. Ivers, you have action item C?
Yes, thank you. There's an application for a telecommunications tower that's under review currently by both the planning board and the zoning board. Both boards requested the assistance of a professional consultant to assist with two components or aspects of the review. One, to take a look at the technical analysis that was prepared and presented as part of the application, RF analysis of the need, that demonstrates the need for the tower in that location. And then the other issue or item was the request for assistance with the visual impact assessment. We solicited quotes from 4 different providers that we felt were qualified to respond to one or both of those needs. Two of the consultants declined to submit due to potential conflict of interest because they have worked or were working with the telecommunications provider. We received a quote from Bergman Associates, and we also received a quote from William Johnson. In review of those quotes with the supervisor and with the attorney that's representing the town, we determined that the best course of action would be to award 2 separate contracts for the RF analysis, and those those quotes were provided to you all as part of this, for the packet for this evening. William Johnson has more than 25 years of experience as an engineer specializing in RF and RF and communications, broadcasting, et cetera. Really well qualified, has done consulting in more than 80 municipalities. So we would recommend having the supervisor enter into contract there for that piece of it. And then Bergman has a long history of visual analysis, visual presentation, both from an environmental standpoint, lots of experience through the secret process, and then also a really strong resume with respect to design, photo simulation, things along those lines. So we feel like they would be better suited to provide that area of expertise. So the request for this evening would be to allow me to prepare resolutions to allow both of those contracts to be executed.
Questions?
I have a question for you, either Carrie. I don't want to put you on the spot on this, or maybe Mark, So when a consultant would actually and go in and actually physically look at the property, walk the property, exactly what do they do to understand it?
The scope of services, they're going to review the materials that were provided. They'll review the application materials. Mm-hmm. Site visit may or may not be required in order to provide the service to the town because they'll be looking at the same materials that the planning board was looking at functionally. So on the data analysis side, in terms of the RF propagation, that's the technical analysis that the applicant provides. They'll take a look at that and determine whether if there's any gaps. Did they do everything that they had to do in order to demonstrate the need for the tower in this location? Did they adequately investigate other sites, et cetera?
And also, could the same result be done another way, accomplished another way?
With other technology, correct.
Right.
And then for the visual impact, they'll take a look at the materials that were provided by the applicant with respect to they had done a balloon and they did some photo simulations. So they'll take a look and see, are there any other aspects that were not explored, anything else that needs to be examined? And it's really just I think for this particular application and in this for telecommunications in particular, there is a provision that allows the reviewing board to request this outside consultant, and the applicant is the one tasked with paying for it. That's stated right in the code.
It is, okay.
It is, yes.
That was my next question.
Okay,
who's paying for that?
Answer it ahead of time.
It's not us.
It's not us,
That's
yeah.
good. That's okay.
It's not us. And, as a message to the public, there is this application before the planning board, and it is before the zoning board still as well. So I encourage you, if you have a question about this project, to look it up and educate yourself on it. I mean, this is a cell tower.
Right.
Okay.
I would move that we enter into the contracts with Bergman and William Johnson.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilperson Cole and a second by Councilperson Ockenden. Are there any questions or comments, any further ones? All right, roll call vote, please.
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Call,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
4 ayes.
Thank you. Action item D was removed from the agenda, and we'll move on to E, request for a hold harmless agreement with Mr. Valentine.
Thank you. So I shared with the board, I was contacted by a resident who had already installed their fence, realized they need to get a hold harmless agreement from this board for that, because we do have a storm sewer easement in that area. They provided the attached documentation showing the areas, where it would impact. There is an existing fence on the south side of their property, so it'd be a portion along the back, and then a piece where it cut through to tie in. So they were showing on the screen in red where that new fence has been installed. I have had conversation with them and understanding, the intent of the hold harmless agreement. If there is a need that the town needs to get into that easement, access it, there is no other way, we have the right to remove the fence. It's at their cost to replace the fence. That would be filed and carried forth, for future homeowners. Did take a look at it. I didn't see any impact of the fence that's there now. So, here before the board, tonight to see if you'd consider a hold harmless agreement for this location.
I mean, this seems very straightforward, and it sounds like the applicant is aware of all the things that go along with a hold harmless agreement.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I just asked one question. Mark, was there a fence there before?
The fence on their neighbor's property was there before. Their fence was not.
Their fence was not, yeah.
So
that's
they put it in, didn't realize they needed
got
a
it.
hold harmless
Yep,
agreement
that's right.
within
I
that.
wasn't sure if there.
Within the easement area. We're made aware of that, want to obviously get that rectified, before the board and get that, cleaned up. So they, obviously apologies for, installing it ahead of time.
Sure.
But obviously wanted to, get that resolved.
We appreciate the applicant's willingness to resolve it. Are there any other questions?
Nope. If not, I'll make a motion to approve moving forward with creation of a hold harmless.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Councilperson Ockenden and a second by Councilperson Draw. And may I have a roll call vote, please?
Cinti,
Aye.
Draw,
Aye.
Call,
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
4 ayes.
Thank you very much. Action item F, and I believe we have the applicant here in the audience as well. And feel free to come on up. And this is a request for a hold harmless agreement at 6 Hilltop Drive.
So this is one that I did not start, so I apologize. I don't know the applicant on this one. There is an existing shed that was on site as well as a new shed. I think you've been informed either you need to get a variance for having 2 sheds or remove the existing shed that's out there. This is located, and we do have a drainage way through there. I know staff did have some concerns about the location of the shed and possible impacts on drainage. I've not been out there personally, and depending on where the board goes with this, and let the applicant speak, is whether maybe we table it tonight, and I know we've got some rain coming tomorrow, Friday. Look at it in a rainy situation and kind of see where the drainage really is going and if it will be an impact or not an impact. So we can have the applicant, speak to that, but, may need some additional information or additional on-site observation on this one.
Sir, would you be willing to just identify yourself and your
Hello, I'm
address?
Robert Bartz at 6 Hilltop. And that shed, where it is located, is it's on the highest point of the property. And because of all the trees on it, there's not very many spots for it to go. The second shed is coming down this summer. But as far as that one, it is really the only location where it won't sit in a low spot on the property.
Okay, so even though it's in the highest point, there's still a concern about drainage.
Yeah, only a corner of the shed cuts through that easement. So if you see on the angle there, only a corner of the shed cuts through the easement.
Okay. Mark, can you point to it?
That little.
Carrie.
Carrie, sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see it.
The new shed is approximately in kind of that tree location.
I see it.
Right there.
So I just haven't personally been out there on this one, so I'd like to observe it in, maybe a rainy situation, see the drainage does come down from the neighborhood in the back and then kind of runs northwest, out the property. So just kind of like to take a look at it personally and just make sure it makes sense and there won't be an impact, moving forward. So, maybe if the board wanted to table it for this evening, give me an opportunity to take a look at it in a rainy situation, I could meet with the applicant offline, take a look at it, and then put it back on in 2 weeks, and then see if, if it's not an impact, then, put it back before the board to consider.
Yeah, I just didn't, I just wanted the applicant to understand that it's just very routine for the engineer to go out and look first. And
Okay.
in this case, he just didn't have that opportunity. So if it's okay with you, and it's really just a 2-week thing, Mark can get out there, and then we'll be all set to act on it.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
I'll make a motion then that we table this until Mark Valentine, the engineer, can go out and take a look at it and then revisit this, as the supervisor said.
Yeah.
Will I have to do anything else to contact you or come back again?
No,
for it, or-
Mark is very happy to walk you through the rest of it, and there's really probably even no need to come back in person if you don't wish to.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But that's completely your call. You're more than welcome.
Okay.
Okay? So we have a motion by Councilperson Draw and a second by Councilperson Cole. Right?
Sure.
Okay. Roll call?
Cinti.
Aye.
Draw.
Aye.
Cole.
Aye.
Ockenden.
Aye.
4 ayes.
Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, action item G, that's also Mr. Valentine, sidewalks for 2022.
So we've brought this up a couple of times already this spring. Most recently, we extended it to where we are today to give opportunity for some petitions to be submitted. The board has received 2 different petitions. The first was for a location along 5 Mile Line Road between Atlantic Avenue and Rothfuss Park. So on the east side, there's one kind of gap location that we're still missing. So we did receive a petition from the neighbors to the south that want to go past the Victory Garden and head towards Rothfuss Park. We received a second petition for Shoecraft Road. So the lower portion between Plank Road, around the curve, over to 5 Mile Line. So in that entirety, we did have a little in the submission, I think it's in the file.
Excuse me, could we just magnify that?
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, you didn't bring your binoculars with you?
I did not, no.
And I think we have the sidewalk petition in there. We also
That's nice, yeah.
put that in, that one right there. Yep. So I had, well, that's the petition. First one, please. Yes. So Catherine, our GIS consultant, I had her map all the locations of the people that signed that petition. So we'll bring that up on the screen momentarily. So it shows that in yellow, a vast majority of them did sign the petition. Not everybody did, but as it loads, you can see that curve, Atlantic Avenue. So the properties that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that signed the petition. So you can see Bella Drive, majority of Christine Circle, much of the frontage of Shoecraft Drive. Signed the petition. The petition says, I'm willing to allow sidewalks on my property frontage. The properties that are grayed out are ones that didn't sign the petition, not saying that they were opposed to it, but just, thought that would be a visual, asset for the board to take a look at. So and as we prepared our cost estimates for the sidewalks, we've gotten requests for sidewalks all over town. We've gotten miles and miles and miles, but just kind of floated to the top, the ones that we had the petition for. Obviously, the board can decide to move up, move down, whatever we've got. So we've got the Shoecraft Road loop piece we left in there. Just looking at the Plank Road, there is one gap piece that still remains just east of the Crown Point development. It was not part of Crown Point. There's a single-family house there. Have not talked to them, discussed if they're willing to grant an easement yet, but it made sense to kind of fill that piece in. Penfield Road, and that's why we say is it a 21 rollover. We still have money from our 21 budget. That's the piece in front of Gentles Market. So right now we're working with Dolomite. Dolomite has to do their piece along their side of Penfield Road. So if you've been by there, they've cleared the trees off. They've got to do some grading of that. They're waiting for a gas main to be relocated. So that's held up a little bit right now. Once they complete that, they'll install their piece, and then we'll piggyback to install the sidewalks on that portion of Penfield Road in front of Gentles Market. So that's a rollover. And then the 5 Mile Line piece is a small piece on 5 Mile Line by Rothfuss Park. So you can see with just the petition piece, we're looking at over $500,000 worth of new sidewalks. Our current budget for the 22 cycle is $180,000 for new sidewalks.
It's a big difference.
And then you can see we've listed the public requests down below. You know, not saying that those aren't any more or less important, but just kind of highlighted the ones that petitions for. You know, adding all of those up, we're well over $2-3 million worth of sidewalk requests and locations. Obviously, that's not something we can do in every year. You know, we'll continue to look at and pursue, you know, funding for different areas, but just kind of floated the ones to the top and, you know, wanted the board's thoughts on those. But even those, I think, you know, we would need to look at a subset of that, maybe a portion of Shoecraft Road. You know, the other two are smaller locations, but you know, maybe Plank to Christine Circle, and, you know, similar to what we did on Panorama Trail, we kind of did that in a couple of years. We couldn't do all of from Penfield Road all the way up to Atlantic Avenue or Browncroft. On Panorama Trail, we kind of did a leap, you know, and then each year we did a little bit more, but open to board's thoughts.
Did you contact the owner on 5 Mile Line about that property?
I have not as of yet. They did not sign the petition. But not saying they're opposed to sidewalks, but again, I didn't want to start anything if that's not where the board wants to go, if that's not where you want to spend the money. I didn't want to.
That might not even be, you know, the thing is you drive by there and you wonder if it's feasible because the hill and everything, I don't know.
Well, that's why we put in costs. Potentially we'd have to do some tree removal. We'd probably have to do some retaining walls. That's why that's more costly than just a flat piece of sidewalk. We got to see if they're willing to grant an easement. If they're not, then are we all in the right of way? You know, for all of these, we'll have to go out and do survey work. You know, we'll have to talk to the property owner and see who's willing to grant easements, look at the utilities, do design. So as we're knocking on the door of June, even if the board says proceed tonight with these, we'll be stretched to see if we can get them in late in the fall. Contractors are having trouble, you know, with materials. Last year's stuff got pushed off, so these may roll into 2023. Would like to get, you know, as much as we can built this year as we can, you know, but we also can look at stuff through, you know, this year's budget cycle included in as well.
So, Mark, just for people watching, I know that a number of projects were pushed off to this year because of materials shortages last year.
Yep.
What's on deck for this year?
We've already installed sidewalks in Columbus Crossing. We've completed here. We've done Empire Boulevard. We had a repair on Huntington Meadow, and then we have the piece on Penfield Road. So the only piece left is Penfield Road that needs to be completed. We're looking to do that in conjunction with the Dolomite piece. So that's what got, you know, rolled over to this year. And then this year, you know, obviously we've got, you know, the $180,000 set aside for this year's budget as well.
That Dolomite, excuse me.
Go ahead.
That Dolomite piece, that's the connectivity to, from Shadow Pond, is that?
That is up as you're heading up the hill on Penfield Road, going up, you know, towards Gentles Market. There's a gap piece, so we extended the sidewalk up with Ellison Heights a number of years ago, and then it stops. There was something in the deed of Dolomite, basically said, when and if we have sidewalks up to your property, you need to install sidewalks. Dolomite has since moved out of that building. They're looking to sell it, but obviously they're still holding up their end of the bargain, saying, yep, that was in our deed. Whether they proceed to sell that property or not, they're still working with us to install the sidewalks as was required by how many years ago. So they'll do their piece. Then there's just a small piece in front of Gentles that's a couple 100 feet. But it would make sense they did their piece, and then we leave a small little gap, you know, to incorporate that in and do that all together. So we're working, you know, along with Dolomite on that one, and, you know, would, you know, include the cost to do it at the same time. We'd pay for our piece, you know, they'll pay for their piece, and then at least get it all done at once, and then you'll have a complete connection from those neighbors, you know, up above. They can walk all the way down to Tops, walk down to the plaza, access, you know, the whole Panorama Valley.
That's wonderful. Now, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you just one on the Shoecraft. I really just wanted a point of a question on that. So the people on Shoecraft, they really want the connectivity up to Plank Road to be able to go to the sidewalk there would connect to Plank and then cross them over to Bauman's, that area? Is there a sidewalk over there? No. It would really be
This
just on.
is just the map, sorry, we're pulling back up. This is the part
Okay.
on Gentles, just to step back a little bit.
Oh, I'm
So this
sorry.
is the portion, Ellison Heights, you can see stopped on the lower right of your screen. That's the piece, going past Dolomites piece that they would install. And then we'd have that small stretch that, would be in front of the, Gentles Market is the piece we'd fill in that area right there.
Okay.
And that's on the schedule.
That was included in, yep,
Yeah, last year.
in last year's budget. So we've got money that we rolled over to hold for that. So we've got that, still on the schedule for that piece. Carrie's pulling up the Shoecraft piece. So they requested all of the road. There is not sidewalks on 5 Mile Line exactly in that area. So going north on 5 Mile Line, to the left-hand side of the screen, there is not sidewalks up until you get to Crossbow. So there's a gap there. But if you go the other side, obviously, there is sidewalks on Plank Road up
All the way
to Shoecraft,
To Shoecraft.
but then minus there is a small little gap section. So as we keep going north, right there we have sidewalks up to the corner of Plank. So if we brought sidewalks down Shoecraft
So
to maybe Christine Circle or something is the first kind of
Yeah.
cross street there, that could afford those residents to come out of the neighborhood and walk to the north, and they could get to Plank Road. And then
Yeah.
on Plank Road, Gary's going back up to the west a little bit, is the one gap piece, and that's why I included that piece, is once you bring them up there, there's the one house right there that is the last piece we're kind of missing on Plank Road. So
Okay.
it made sense if we're going to put a connection on Shoecraft, or that was in consideration, is to fill in that gap. Again, I've got to see if that homeowner is willing
Now-
to grant an easement or not.
When that development that wants to come forward on Shoecraft, right? The rezoning for the development that wants to go on Shoecraft?
That's up on, right across the street from where we're looking right now. So the treed portion on the north end, so that it's on the northern portion, so go to your left. Right.
Oh, forgive me.
So this is I call it the Gasberry property. That's the piece there. So, I mean, if
As
a
that,
waiver was granted and that could go into the sidewalk fund and then
that's
could
what I was thinking,
That
you
would
know?
be-
That would
could
be
provide
those kind of
sidewalks.
Incentives, I mean, it's part of the development.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
gonna
not
happen
directly on that
tomorrow,
area that
you
they've
know?
requested now, but, as we look at that, and if there were sidewalks waiver granted for that, that could be dedicated to the fund and
And we
extend those.
haven't done sidewalks up in that area of the town
No.
to my understanding, in a while. I mean.
But this would make sense, right?
Right.
If this development actually went through, then it's getting even more people wanting to
Right.
walk on the sidewalks for their own safety anyway, because of all the traffic that'll be added, so
Yep.
there's a lot of.
And then the Crown Point development did the sidewalks, and that's why there is a gap. They did their portion along Plank Road.
Right, right.
Just completed that, so we've kind of got that piece and that connectivity there, and I'm sure that's what kind of spurred on the people on Shoecraft to say, hey, if we can get a sidewalk, walk up to Plank, then I can walk from there over to Bauman's, or I can walk, I mean, you could walk from there westward all the way over to Baytown Plaza, and
Yep, you
Right,
could.
but like you say, that's a long stretch that they're requesting, that's, maybe that could be phased, and especially if this other opportunity arises that could help pay for the sidewalks even better.
Can we just
Or,
go back to
excuse
the
me, or, sorry.
master list?
Garden Hill Lane. I keep saying Christine Circle, but Garden Hill Lane, I think, is the kind of that major.
Gotcha.
Go back to the spreadsheet.
Oh, yes, forgive me.
On the master list, I know that the residents from Rossbrook area also had contacted the town last year about a sidewalk. And was there a resolution to that?
We have not gotten a further petition back, and my apologies if it's not on the list. It should be. It may just been tabbed off, but that was still under the public request. It did come before this board last year. We had one petition that said we want it on the south side. The board said, we agree, let's move forward. We had gotten survey. At the time the surveyors were out there, we had residents that came out and said, well, we don't want it here. They had signed the petition saying they wanted it there. They gathered another petition to have it on the north side. That petition didn't include anybody on the north side, but so, and then they also added an Alta Vista. So they came before the board. The board basically said the neighborhood needs to decide where they want it, which side of the road they want it, and then come back once you kind of have that resolved amongst yourselves. You know, they didn't want to, thankfully, put that on staff for us to go and, you know, let the neighborhood, you know, wrestle that out. I've had conversations back and forth with some of the residents on Rossbrook throughout the year, but they have yet to come back with another petition saying this is where we want it, this is the side of the road, we're in agreement. So I'd say we've got it on our list. It's in, you know, with all the rest, but I think until they come back with a definitive answer of they're in agreement which side of the road, then
I think that's how we left it last year.
It is, and I just wanted to reflect on that for the record.
Yep.
Because I didn't see it on the list, and
my apologies. I know we were moving some stuff around, but we've still, you know, have the cost estimate.
okay. But the neighbors haven't made their final decision.
We've not seen anything, and I'd say we also provided the board an overall, and it's very hard to see on this screen, an overall map of the town, our existing sidewalks, and then in pink we kind of highlighted all the areas that were requested, just so you can kind of visually see that. I say we've got, you know, miles and miles of sidewalk of requests. You know, unfortunately, we don't have funds to do them all. You know,
Right.
We'd love to, but you know, obviously we've got a finite budget to work with.
Okay.
So, Mark, if you would, could you just refresh or maybe educate me a little bit more on what happens when, as we look at Shoecraft and there's some gaps and whether the people just didn't sign, like you said, or maybe we don't know if they're opposed or not. So what happens when we have these gaps?
I mean, obviously, first and foremost, you know, if that's where the board decides, you know, they'd like sidewalks, we typically, you know, prepare a sketch, send it out to the neighbors, look at, can we work in the right-of-way? Can we work, do we need to go on private property? If we can work in the right-of-way and there's room, you know, we can install sidewalks through there, you know, whether the homeowner really wants them or not. You're working in the right-of-way, which is in the public realm. Obviously, you know, we talk to all the homeowners first, you know, discuss it with them. If we had to get an easement, you know, either you could look at, you know, how we acquire that, or, you know, if we had to go eminent domain, you know, we haven't done that often. You know, but typically the neighbors, you know, talk amongst themselves and, you know, hopefully for the greater good, you know, look at that, or a neighbor has a concern about a tree or something that's out there, and, you know, often we can kind of discuss that with them and hopefully allay some fears of, you know, what it will impact, what it won't impact. People often misunderstand what is their property, what's the public right-of-way. You know, so oftentimes we'll kind of do a preliminary sketch, a layout, and then schedule an evening walkthrough with the neighbors. We did it on Huntington Meadows. We met out there 5:30, 6 o'clock, met on one end of the street, walked the street with the neighbors, said, here's where it's going, here's what it would impact. You know, a lot of times it's just kind of informational for the neighbors of
Gotcha.
how it's going to proceed, how it's going to happen. You know, there may be room, Carrie's, you know, showing 15 feet. That's approximate, but, you know, there's, you know, could be opportunity that, you know, it could fit well within the right-of-way, and,
Sure.
you know, we may not need an easement from the neighbor, you know, in that location.
All right. And so as I look at the list, I think those top four, you know, are good selections personally. As I look down at the other requests below, and you know, Jackson Road, obviously, I think can make a good argument that that's, you know, is equally as important perhaps as Shoecraft. Is there that? Do we have the ability to do any kind of traffic counting on those roads, or is that more of a county feature?
We do. I mean, we have tube counters, and we've shared the similar recommendation to the neighbors on Jackson Road. I think they're struggling with where to put the sidewalk and if easements are needed, where to grant them. So we've talked to the neighbors. We basically said the same thing to them, is go out and get a petition, talk to the neighbors, and pick a side of the road, and it makes our job a heck of a lot easier. Gotcha. Excuse me. If they pick the side of the road, then we can go out and assess, you know, what impact there is. Everybody loves sidewalks. A lot of people like them on the other side of the road than on their side of the road.
Yeah.
So that complicates it for us. So we've put that out to the Jackson Road neighborhood. We've yet to hear back from them saying, yes, we're all in concurrence. We've decided here's where we want it. So
Okay, so
my estimation, there's still some internal or some
Sure.
discussion amongst the neighbors on where to go with it, where to want it. You know, not saying there's not a need. Jackson Road or Old Jackson, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
is a much tighter road.
Yep.
There's a lot of older trees, so likely we would need easements, grading releases. There's a lot of stuff in there that, we'd have to navigate through there. So if people are unwilling to grant easements, especially on the curbs and the bends, that makes it much more challenging to, try to install it. And then you'd have to look at, whether you do eminent domain. And, so I know this board in the past is kind of followed if the neighbors have it sorted out and know where they want it, which side of the road, and they're all in agreement. Obviously, that's a much easier path for staff to.
Okay, but so we have not received
navigate.
a formal petition from Jackson Road then?
We have not.
Okay.
No, we've kept it on the list. We've
Yep. Yeah, I
have it
think
on there.
when we-
We've got a lot of other locations that again, a lot of great recommendations. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think
comments.
when we approved that development off of Jackson Road, the last one, we seemed to get the feeling that, there were residents who would like that added to that stretch, and it seemed to make sense at the time, too. But, and then my last comment would be the 5 mile segment. Obviously, we haven't spoken with the homeowner there, but I think what makes that unique is the fact that the people, who live in that subdivision who did submit the petition, to go to our park, our town park, have to cross 5 Mile Line Road 4 times to get there and back. And as the letter that we received stated, there is a little bit of a hill in that stretch. I did drive that recently, and I see exactly what they're referring to. So I just want to make my comment on that stretch. I think it's important. We don't like to have dead-end sidewalks, and, this one, the uniqueness is it's taking people to the park that we put on 5 Mile Line Road, so I think that, to me, is important. So.
Yeah, and
You
if the-
say that too, the Victory Garden's right there next door too. And I get concerned with the Victory Garden at times because there's not enough room for the people that are there to park, And if they have to walk onto 5 Mile Line to go park in Rothfuss Park, which is a larger parking lot, obviously, it's good for them too. It's excess, so. I agree.
Okay, so back to the list.
Yes.
And just focusing on those top 4, we still would need to cut,
Yes.
right?
Well, the Shoecraft one,
Could we just highlight those 4 or just magnify those 4? So
we'd phase it no matter what, right? Because it's so long
Okay.
and there's potential funding down the road. But there's so much to go with that one, because it is still a cut through for a lot of people who don't want to drive all the way down to 5 Mile Line and make a right on Plank. They do cut through there. And it's that weird curve too, which is difficult for people to walk on. And so, I see a good justification for it, but we can't do it all, obviously.
Yeah.
And we can reach back out to there was one gentleman that provided, the petition for it. I just looked at it, possibly from Garden Hill going north, you could, tie into the Plank Road sidewalks, whether that's their first choice of where to put them, where to install them. But at least I think if you could kind of start there, you're building off an existing sidewalk coming south.
Right.
Right.
And then, whether we could get, additional funding or look, in
So
next
I'd want-
year's kind of do it in portions and, kind of extend that in sections.
So I guess I'd want to know what their priority is as far as phasing that.
Okay.
And I'd also like to know if the homeowner on 5 Mile Line is even willing to do that,
Okay.
right? Wouldn't we want that information?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they've got to be contacted. That's the
Right.
next
We've
step.
always talked
Okay.
about that. If one of the major components of the sidewalk is against it, we have only a certain amount of money, and we want to put it where.
Right. So
our
we don't know what we
residents
don't know
want
yet.
it. Right.
So
But at least that gives me direction. If the board wants to
I
go
agree.
that way, then I'll proceed and we can, again, roll this 2 weeks. I can make those contacts in the next 2 weeks and then, put this as a tabled item and then come back before the board with more information. But with so many items on the list, and you could say, no, I don't like those ones, we want to investigate this, this, and this, it was just a little hard to chase down every spot and every neighbor and to know who's in, who's out, and then people are excited it's coming and it's not. So, it's just a little hesitancy on our part to get too far ahead of our blockers, depending on where the board wanted to go with sidewalks and locations, and either people are excited or people are upset. But if this is where the board seems to want to focus, then, we can, talk to those residents in the meantime, chase down the information, and then come back with an update
That would be great. I
2
think
weeks.
I think we need that, and then we can make a better decision.
Okay.
But I understand your point about, making sure that the money that we do have is used to benefit the most amount of people, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll table this for June 8th, okay? All right. That concludes our action items, and I have 2 informational items. The first one is recognizing groups for Heritage Month. And I wanted to just bring this up to the board. I was approached by a few residents about what the town might do to recognize special months. May in particular, I think, is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Jewish Heritage Month. There are obviously other months honoring different groups. And what I noticed is that we kind of have silence, and I don't have any direction about what the town board thinks is appropriate. So what I wanted to do is just ask your opinions about it, and if you could just think about it so that we can come back to this discussion in 2 weeks. I would appreciate, what you would prefer and how we can do that.
Do you have a calendar? Do you have a calendar that lists all these things?
I don't have a calendar, but I would certainly provide one to you so that you have it.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Great. And then, as discussed on when we did our agenda, I did add another informational item, which is a crossing guard request. We did receive several inquiries recently over the past, I would say, 4 weeks to 6 weeks about a crossing guard at Penfield High School. I just wanted to have an informational discussion so that the public is aware that we received the concerns. My understanding is that after looking that is actually, even though it's for the school, the town actually pays for this. So what I wanted to do was let you and the public know that we're reaching out to the school to find out exactly what their needs might be. And also, we want to just be deliberate about whether they need one, where exactly they need one. I also want to alert the public, too, that, that doesn't happen overnight. So we still have to recruit if we go this direction, recruit, train, et cetera. So I don't want to set up the public's hopes that, by Friday, that this problem will be resolved. It's a longer conversation. And then I also wanted to just ask if this request for a crossing guard could be also brought to the Transportation Committee as well for their June meeting.
We'll add it to the agenda.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you had questions about? All right. There's no other items under information. Is there any old business? And I did just do the new business. I'm sorry, that was really under new business.
That's okay.
Our next work session meeting will be June 8th, and we will declare this meeting adjourned at 8:03. Thank you very much to everyone here tonight, and to PCTV, and to Greg, our security. Thank you very much.